Okay, Mech Warriors, working our way through a little bit of Q&A here, and in this podcast, in this vlog, we're going to look at armor. And the question that I had incoming was, Fritz, playing around with mech design and looking at some of the rules for Battletech, how can you explain, or how can we begin to understand the distribution of armor, the armor bubbles, external armor on there? There's so much on the front. Why isn't it equal throughout the entire mech, or why isn't there more on the back? And certainly there's a little bit that you can play with on there, but for the most part, if we look at the narrative, if we look at the history of the game, and then layer over the tactics, Battletech is very much tanks on legs on there. And there's this idea that based on the weaponry and how it works, there are certain aspects, tanks and vehicles that have something on a turret, but for the most part, even with a firing arc, everything faces forward on there. So you're going to try and keep your mech facing forward. It just makes sense from a tactical design to put the bulk of your armor facing the front on there, much like a modern tank. So following that thought process on the tactical level, it makes the game a lot more tactically complex. Imagine a mech where everything was equal all around, or even a vehicle where everything was equal all around, and you have weapons that can do 360 all around. That would look kind of interesting from that aspect. But if you were doing that, the game would just be little pogs or little islands kind of moving and coming into range and just furiously rolling dice. If you've had a chance to play a couple of Battletech games, you know if you can get rear armor, that can be a game changer. If you have a light mech, or for the most part a medium mech, something like the Hunchback, if it can get rear armor against a heavy or an assault mech, that's a major problem for your opponent on there. So there's this idea in Battletech tactically where you're trying to face off against the targets, not that you ever want to get hit, but you want to face off with your armor facing forward. And now as you take damage, well, if my left side starts to really kind of get damaged, then maybe I'll shift my mech where the right side, this idea of blading, right? Like a blade, put my right side forward. So hopefully if my right side is facing you, that might cut down on some weapons, but I can soak up more damage based on being hit left, right, or center. So tactically, it opens up so much. There's also some really, really interesting times in the game. A previous game, actually a recent game, I was playing my longbow, playing one longbow, and I had an infantry screen around the longbow. I was really stretched for battle value. I probably would have been better off playing an archer. Admittedly, we all have our favorite mechs. I'm a little bit obsessed with the longbow on there. But going into that, I knew I should probably play the archer because it has the ability to at least move forward and try and brawl and try to utilize the lasers more efficiently on there. So the longbow, one longbow in the back, I didn't have mech redundancy. The longbow itself has redundancy in that I've got the 220 packs and the 2.5s. That's got some bite, right? That's got some good missiles coming down. But I would have been better off having two types of missiles, using it in support, or maybe switching down to autocannons on there, although the missiles have indirect, and that was a big part. So the idea was this was going to be my little fire base, my fire support, direct or indirect. And I was taking a lot of return fire from Shrek PPC carriers on there. I was taking some serious hits. And if you have a chance, look, if you've never played the longbow before, look at the armor bubbles on its arms. You think there's a misprint on there. You're like, this can't be for the tonnage. I mean, it has virtually nothing, and these are the missile pods on there. So when you take those hits, thankfully to the arms, you're okay with the ammo, but you're going to get your LRM-20 knocked out on there. And if it goes physical, if something does close, you've just got your pop lasers, and you're really going to be kicking on there. So a longbow does not like to take return fire. But based on the mission, I had to really play it aggressively. And I soaked up a lot of damage. It went to internals. I did lose a 20 pack on one of the arms. But I was taking so much frontal damage, but at the same turn, I was pressing that fire button as fast and as furious as I could every single turn. It got to the point I took so much damage on the front that I turned around, So I'm rear armor facing my opponent, and based on the design of the longbow, flipping that missile pod back on there. And you know things are getting crazy in Battletech when not only are you giving your opponent rear armor, there is currently more rear armor, and you're like, please hit me on the rear armor than the front armor on there. So an interesting aspect from there relating to the armor bubbles, how to use it, how to manipulate it. But that is my understanding from that design perspective. The game revolves around essentially tanks on legs. Most of the armor is forward-facing, and based on the tactics, based on the tech, based on how weapons are mounted with the hard points, that makes sense from a design philosophy. I want everything facing forward. I want my armor facing forward on there.